We're starting. It's official. So, thank you for coming, or I always say in Portuguese, obrigado por terem vindo. My name is Bruno, and I'm here to tell you a story about web development. Okay, now I have all the equipment. But first things first. Who here is a software developer? Okay. For more than 2 years? For more than 5 years? 10 years? Okay, cool. People is getting old. 15 years? Okay, cool. So my story will cover like 15 years of software development, more or less. And let's get started. Whoa, it doesn't work. Okay, cool. Computer science. So, before we start, I would like to introduce you to two concepts that I will refer a lot during my talk. First concept is computer science. This discipline, I would like to point that is 60 years old. It's not that new. We are still guessing what we are doing. And if you go to the literature and you check what the godfathers that invented the discipline says about it, they are the first ones to tell that probably this is not about computers at all. This is a new way of us expressing ourselves. And if you guys are software developers, I bet that you guys identify yourself with this cartoon. So basically, every time that you discover a new technology, every time that you have a new project in your hands, man, this is going to be great. This time I'm going to nail it. And a couple of months later, oh my God, what the heck I built again. And this loop goes over and over and over again. It's always like this. It's like you always think, this time I'm going to make the right things, and never happens. The reason for that is it's a quite new field. And I would like also to point to the second factor, that is this notion of cost gravity. And what is cost gravity? Cost gravity is the phenomenon that makes expensive technology that create empires fall into commoners' tools, and the empire drops, and it becomes common sense knowledge, and everyone has the knowledge. And you see this happening over and over again. It's completely unstoppable, and one of the main drivers is the spread of information, and is done through oral tradition. That's what I'm doing here. I'm through oral tradition trying to explain and convey some knowledge to you guys. And this phenomenon, also the oral tradition one, also sometimes you cannot trace back where the knowledge comes from. For example, a good example of knowledge, since we are all Portuguese, it's like local knowledge. For example, if I tell you guys that I have a 31 in my hands, everyone knows that I have a fucking problem in my hands. But if you try to tell this outside of Portugal, no one will get it. Everyone, what, you have a 31? And no one can explain why we know when we refer to the number 31, we have a problem. And this has to do how we communicate, how we transfer knowledge to each other. And this phenomenon is very well described in this book called Culture and Empire. I highly recommend you guys, if you guys are interested in this topic, to read this book. This is not what we're talking about here to talk about. But I'm going to refer a lot to these two concepts and the fact that they influenciate a lot what we do. So I'm Brunex, and I'm going through 15 years of cost gravity, and I'm going to tell you my struggles, the stories, what I learned, what I didn't learn. And the main reason for me to do this is because the scene here is starting now. And when I was on that side, I would love to have someone like coming here and sharing this kind of knowledge. So that's the main reason why I'm doing this talk. So I hope you guys enjoy. And now I'm going to really start the talk. So the kind of software that we are going to talk about is the software that is what's so-called web development. This is not how my slides should look. But OK, we'll sort it out. This will make much less sense now. That yeah, the slides are not like that. on my screen. So this projector doesn't work well with the colors that I choose. So the type of software that I'm talking about is the software that is available on the internet and you need a web browser to access it. There's other kinds of software. I'm not speaking about that. So, and how it all started. It all started in the late 90s. I bet that you guys, there are some old people here like me. The internet was a very rare resource. You needed to go to school to access the internet. If your mom, when you were on the internet, pick up the phone, you will drop the internet. By this time, to go to the internet was like, you guys remember probably that. Yeah, so everyone was going to the internet, was downloading MP3 and games and playing offline. No one actually paid too much attention to what it was about. And software development, you need to go to school, and there we learn Pascal, C, C++, and all that stuff. I bet that if you guys went to school at this time, you guys also tried to do web development in Word. That was an idea that we had at the beginning. That was a good idea. Didn't work out. Microsoft gave up on that. That's cool. And then we have the discovery phase. So after a while, cost gravity kicks in, and we start to organize ourselves. We start to create communities online. We start to go a lot to IRC, to Mirk. I bet that you guys spend a lot of time there. The first search engines start to show up. You start to have Alta Vista. That was the first text search, and then later replaced by ranked search by Google. Google completely killed it. During this phase, everything that was related with software development was very proprietary. All the discussions were kept in secret, God knows where, in Microsoft, Java offices. Nothing was public. This was great times. Don't get me wrong. So during these times, you could convince anyone to install anything on their computer. That were amazing. And because of that, you have the first big revolution in terms of web development and web. That revolution is caused by Flash. I don't know if you guys know Flash, but Flash was like, Flash gave us a glimpse to the future and see what was possible to build on the web before we even had software communities and we discuss about software the way that we discuss. And Flash came in two parts. There was a part that was the way that you compile and develop software, and there was a browser plugin that you needed to install on people's browser, and so they can see the content. This disrupted everything that we knew about how the web worked, and people were really going crazy. And this was also when I first faced software communities, and I had this notion. By the time I didn't know, but now looking back, I can connect the dots and understand what was going on. I remember going to Brighton, to UK, to Flash on a beach, and hanging out with a lot of developers. And during these times, everything was possible. We were really dreaming about what the web was about and what was coming. But guess what? Flash died. Didn't work out. Flash died. It was a very cool experience. We tried a lot, we experimented a lot, and until today we're still catching up in terms of what we can do in the web browser. JavaScript still catching up. It's not quite there. CSS is a mess. But Flash left a very big legacy. Thanks to Flash, we start to have YouTube, and that was a game-changing. From the moment that we start to have a thing like YouTube, you could start sharing knowledge and spread the knowledge in a speed that was like something completely new and novel. During this time, I will risk that you have the first viral tech video, that is build your blog in 15 minutes with Ruby on Rails. I saw it, I tried, it took me more than 15 minutes. And it's harder than you guys think, but this really happened, and everyone was trying it out because we were now sharing how we should build software, and in a complete different way, and people could see it and understand and move from there. During this phase, you also have a very fancy web application showing up, that is Gmail. When Gmail was released, I remember I was in school, and I was quite a big fan of Flash. And I was looking at Gmail, man, how they built this? This looks a lot like Gmail, like Flash, but doesn't have Flash. How they build it? No one knew. I asked my teachers, I asked everyone that was doing software development, dude, how they build Gmail? No one knew. It was completely novel. Like, they were showing what was already possible to do with JavaScript and Ajax and all that technologies that no one had shared among us yet. This is also when we start seeing breaking out of the proprietary era, and we start to have software communities, Ruby on Rails, like leading the path and showing how it should be done. Then the most important thing for us as software developers during this history that I'm going to tell happened. That is Linus Torvalds, everyone knows. He maintains the biggest open source project, that is the Linux kernel. He got fed up on using tarballs and mailing lists and trying to synchronize the whole team. It took 6 months of his life, and he built Git. And then GitHub is turning Git into a social network, as you want to call it, like that, I don't know. This was the first time that we start to share actually code with us, among us. This trend forced everyone to go open source. It was like, the way that we started speaking about software was not anymore about dreaming and telling people stories. Oh, I'm building this amazing space rocket that's going to the moon. And people, okay, show me your code. Put on GitHub, show me your code. This completely changed the way that we start speaking about software. And it forced all the proprietary software houses to go open source. Otherwise, people will not even care to bother to use your tools. Microsoft and .NET and everything, Java and everything became open source after that. So you can imagine what comes next with so much knowledge there, with this new startup movement showing up and all this stuff. Being a web developer became profitable and easy. Everyone could now be a web developer by going and reading how to build a blog in 15 minutes. You start to also have the first good examples of unicorn startups and very successful companies. It was amazing times. Everyone like, whoa, Web 2.0, we're going to rule the world. Well, yes and no. During this time, we start to realize, well, we now have built this software, and I need to run the software. I need to run the software somewhere. We now start to build more websites, and it was very hard for us to find where to host these things. This opens an opportunity for a new business model. Amazon probably leading the pack there also. Realizes that and opens the way to deploy software to everyone and creates their cloud, the AWS, and still leading the market in that field, I guess. That was only half of the equation of what was missing. The second big problem was that all software development was very biased. Biased in the sense that we came from an era where software development was a one-on-one relation. It was like a user on a computer. The software was working, only one person, only one computer. And suddenly you have the software running, and you have thousands of people trying to access that software. And a good example of that is Twitter. Twitter almost died because it couldn't handle the amount of people using Twitter. I think it's a very well-known story. And who killed almost Twitter was Ruby. Because the way that Ruby was assuming how web development should work, because it comes from a biased era, and he followed the patterns, and it was a little bit wrong. During this time, we pretty much have everything wrong. Oh yeah, whoa. This is how it should look like. So basically, during this time, we were also doing all the front-end code very badly. It was a spaghetti code, HTML soap of things. If you were doing PHP, probably here is a SQL query on the middle of HTML. we were learning how to do this. We were also quite biased in terms of databases, and only existed SQL databases. And because SQL is not the way that we program, we don't use relational algebra in our programs. So then we had ORM to marshalling the data back and forth always, that we needed the data in our programming language every time that we needed to save. During this time is when you also start to see like the full stack developer movements showing up and all that stuff. That is people who understands the whole enchilada and knows how to produce some HTML code and produce some views. And yeah. And another problem that we start to face was this thing of deploying code is much harder than you think. It's much harder. You start to have this new concept, DevOps. It's people dedicated only to solve the problem, how we deploy the code, and to deal with the complexity of how a cloud works. Like if you go to AWS, probably will take you months to even understand everything that they have available for you. It's very hard, trust me. And during this time, we were treating our servers as chirurgical patients. So if you have a problem, there was always the sysadmin that knew how to SSH to the machine and fix the problem. It was the black sorcery. This leads us to the next phase, that is the runtime of the web. So I was now talking about more backend, but in the front-end side, there was a huge race for the runtime of the web. All the major browsers were fighting against each other to get the fastest JavaScript engine. And this was like cost gravity going on. And then another phenomenon that I started to realize was that you needed to pick a software community. There was no such thing, I work with a Python guy, a Ruby guy, and a .NET guy. No. We are human beings, and we suffer from this problem that we are like cultural beings, and we need to identify ourselves on a tribe, on a pack, and we don't agree about anything. It's like software, it's like a religious, becomes like a religion. And you can't even tell us why you defend this language, like you cannot also defend why you are a Christianist or atheist or whatever. The same way why you are from Benfica or from Sporting. And this becomes then a trend. Everyone has their communities, everyone dresses the community t-shirt. And my community of choice was JavaScript. Yay! Node.js. Woo. So coming from the side of cost gravity, you start to have these new indie conferences. JavaScript was not a thing. Like JavaScript is the only programming language that doesn't have a book. The guy that wrote JavaScript didn't write a book to tell us what was his intention. So, but the community and the software development, they saw the potential. I would bet that was Flash that showed the potential of the browser. And the community continued trying to push the runtime of the web forward and forward. And they start to organize themselves, create these new conferences. And then out of the blue, you have Ryan Dahl that shows up at GSConf and tells everyone, look, guys, you guys are all doing I/O wrong. I know your problem. That's why you can't scale your apps. I/O, you are doing it wrong. And he was right. During this time, if you look back, I don't know if you guys were doing software at this time, but it was mission impossible to do a web application where you could upload an image and show the progress bar. It was impossible. Impossible. And thanks to Ryan Dahl, now that's a trivial task. Another thing that started because of the way that we were doing I/O was very hard to do real-time apps that like chats and Slacks and all that kind of stuff. It was very, very hard. But once Ryan Dahl opened the eyes, like that became the easiest thing. Everyone was building chats now. This was a huge opportunity. And Ryan Dahl really nailed it, because JavaScript had a mass adoption by the time, and never went to the server. There's no way of doing I/O. So it was like, let's get that part at least right. JavaScript was also the first functional language to reach the mainstream. That is a huge thing. No one values that, but I think that is a huge thing. Then Node.js also is one language that comes after GitHub. That is a huge advantage. So he leapfrogged a lot of ways of doing software, and he started straight away with a package manager. A lot of other languages only had a package manager much later. They embraced the Unix philosophy. Instead of building a very big core language, they only focused on very small things and let the user ecosystem be very noisy and let everyone go crazy there. And this was a blessing and a curse. So I don't know if you guys tried Node.js. I came here to present Node.js at Geek sessions like 2008. And yeah, Node.js, when we installed Node.js during this time, was like clear as mud what we should do with that. It came with a HTTP module and a file system module. Good luck with that. During that time, there was no, we lost all the plumbing. If you wanted to do Node.js, you had no HTTP framework, you had no way of connecting to a database. You lost all the plumbing and everything. The language was only starting, and that scared the shit out of people. No one wanted to use it. I remember having arguments with everyone, like everyone, why you want to use that? Now you can't connect to any database. This also gave opportunity to the JavaScript community to reinvent all the wheels, break all the conventions, break everything, and try new ideas. So that was amazing. And during that time, you start to hear also speaking about NoSQL databases, and guess what? Node.js, because they didn't have a way of connecting to SQL, let's do it for NoSQL. And Node.js was one of the main boosters of the movement NoSQL, and MongoDB mainly. Going a few years later, the curse enters. So we start to have thousands and millions of modules to solve the same problem. No one knows what to use. And that's where we are at the moment, probably. I don't know what is your methodology to find what is the best thing to use, but I think it's speaking among people and like sharing knowledge and this cost gravity, we know what to use, but no one have a big pattern how to discover what to use. During this time is when I also make fun, because I think you start to have the npm install airball. No one anymore knows what's coming with that npm module. Comes the banana in the entire jungle. And this opens also, so this ends my story, pretty much, I think. This opens a discussion for this, why we all disagree in terms of software development. Why? And I want you guys to think about that. And my guess, and I'm going to try to explain why I think it is, it's like if you should see programming and the programming field as a terrain that is always changing and always as a maximum that is the community that is doing the right thing at some point in time, but suddenly someone figures out a better way of doing something better, and this is the terrain where you see these things going up and down. And cost gravity, that is the way that we share knowledge, also influences this a lot. And if you want to also see this, I recommend you guys see this talk from RailsConf. I'm going to share at the end the links for you guys to read if you want. One of the main problems that we have is we are human beings, and it's very hard for us to change. Change is a thing that we try to avoid always. We are afraid of change. We want to be on our comfort area always. But thanks to microservices, it's kind of okay to disagree now. We nailed it. So we built so much software. Each community went on their different paths. Each community specialized. Like you, for example, the best in-memory database. You know that is Redis. You know that to build a blog, you go Ruby on Rails. You know that each community went like I/O. You should go Node. Node is highly specialized on I/O, and you can then abstract everything else that is necessary, all the knowledge that is necessary thanks to Docker, and start from a blank sheet where everything works. You only need to focus on how you develop software. Until then, you needed to have years and years of knowledge to be able to start coding, because it was very hard to start. Thanks to Docker, you go and pick up a Docker file, and you start coding, and you know that your code will work in the right way. And then you can also pick up all these tools and through microservice connect them all together and know the protocols, how they communicate. And you don't need to know what is inside of that black box. You only need to know, okay, I run it, is there running somewhere, this service, I have 10 of them, and I communicate via this protocol. And this finished my story. I hope you guys liked. And I would like to try to predict the future now. Where we are heading, where are we going? First thing that I would like to point is every time that someone comes like with this, like I'm doing now, just ask yourself, why do they think that? Why the hell they think they know the future? Everyone will come with different opinions depending on their experiences and depending on the communities that they have. It's the same thing when people try to sell you God. Oh, you should follow God. You should ask yourself, why do you think that is a good idea? So I would like to point you guys that tools, it's all about tools. Tools dictate not only how we produce code, how we think, it also influences our believing system. If you follow Ruby on Rails, you have a complete belief system if you follow a language like Node.js. Be aware of that. Be very aware of that, because once you are aware of that, you can actually realize what's going on. If you tunnel and you became completely ignoring everything that's around you, you will be a fanatic. So where we are heading in terms of programming languages and programming, I think we are heading on a functional way. And I'm not teaching what functional programming is on this class, sorry. But I will give you an idea of what's going on here. And the notion is that in functional programming, you can use math as something that you can prove. So basically, you know what a function is in math. It's something that accepts some input and produces some output. But that is only true if the things that you are passing to the function and returning from the function are immutable, like numbers. A number 2 is always a number 2. A number 4 is always a number 4. So you can infer if you have a function that is a sum, every time that you sum 2 and 2, you will always get 4. But if you have a language that a 2 sometimes is a 4 and a 4 sometimes is a 6 because you can mutate them a la carte, then you stop being able to infer, to use this, infer these things and to have absolute truths. And this is how a functional programmer sees the world. So you have this thing. You have your database. There's some I/O, and you have your browser. There's some I/O, and there's the functional code. And we isolate the functional code and everything that you can assume that is true, and we can prove through math, and it's all immutable there. And we quarantine everything else that is about actions in a special area. We pull everything that is state-related and changing the state of the world to the edges of our program. And that is possible with all languages. Is one harder than ones, but I think it's possible. You should be aware that you should avoid mutation in the middle of your logic code, and you should pull that to the edges of your program. In terms of front end, I think we can also be unanimous here. I think React is winning the race. Once again, it's the same kind of thing. It's like here on the server, what's happening? You are doing the exact same thing on the client. Is you are pushing everything that is state related to the edges of your program, and you have pure data that you only see the differences, and you generate a new version of DOM, and you call a function every time that you change every time that is an action that requires to change the state of the world. You have that action here, it changes the state of the world, you call render, you see what is the difference between the new state and the old state, and you generate a new version of the DOM. So that's the main idea. And deployment of code. I need to tell this to the camera. Craig, deployment of code is much harder than you think. No, it's the other way around. It's for me. Yeah, Craig is a friend of mine, and and I'm always making joke that the DevOps is a person that edits config files, and everyone can do that job. But it's much harder than you guys think, than I think. And sorry, Craig. Deployment of code. So functional programming, you have excuses. If you are not using, your programming is not functional, it's all good. Eventually, all programming language will move to functional if you don't move. But a deployment of code, you should start doing proper DevOps straight away. You should aim to deploy the code as soon as you can, as soon as you have a new feature, or the next time the clock ticks, being that the next release or the next week, next month. If you are not doing that, you have a problem. And you need to fix that problem. You should stop treating your servers as chirurgical patients and start treating them, for example, I have a good analogy here. Imagine that instead of, like, I broke my arm, instead of patching my arm and fix my arm, and living with a patch arm forever, like we did with servers, imagine that you can clone a new version of me just the moment before I broke my arm, and remove the old one with the broken arm and keep going with the arms. Okay, that's how you should see servers these days. It's hard to change from one mindset to another, but once you change, you have huge advantages. So basically, for you to have an idea, it's like this thing here. You define a state in a source control that every time that you want to change how your service behave, you change it here. You have all the history of what changed, and you apply and you destroy the old one, and you have a new one with your changes. And you should start doing DevOps straight away. To finalize, this is very scary. Don't get me wrong, this is very scary. But I would like to point that getting smarter will not fix your tools, unless you are Facebook and you rewrite PHP. But I think that's, I think probably they are regretting now also. But be in mind that things are always changing. They will be always changing. Programming is like this terrain that you are the best, your language is the best one, and suddenly it doesn't worth anything. Everyone is talking shit about it. Be in mind also that these cycles repeat themselves. So it's always like we go to a dead end, and someone comes with a new idea, and the cycles begin, and everyone goes on a new trend, like you saw with I/O, with Node. And now you are seeing probably with functional programming. And don't give up. This is getting much easier. We have now this huge community. We have Geek Sessions. We have Shift Faro. And yeah, rock on.